The courtroom was packed. A low murmur buzzed through the gallery as people whispered about the unusually tense hearing scheduled that morning. At the center of the storm stood Judge Andrew H. Stones, a man known for his disdainful demeanor and open contempt for conservative legal figures. And seated just across from him, with her signature composure, was Pam Bondi. She was representing a whistleblower in a case involving potential judicial misconduct, and the fact that Stones himself had not recused despite being indirectly named in the evidence raised more than a few eyebrows. As the session began, Stones adjusted his glasses, leaned forward, and stared at Bondi with a crooked grin. "Oh, Ms. Bondi," he chuckled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Back in my courtroom again. Are you here to practice law, or just to deliver another Fox News audition?" A wave of uneasy laughter rippled through a few of his supporters in the gallery. Pam didn't flinch. She slowly rose to her feet, straightened a single sheet of paper from her folder, and looked directly at the bench. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said calmly, "I would strongly advise you to withhold any further commentary until you've had a chance to review what's in this affidavit. And what I have in this flash drive." Judge Stones rolled his eyes. "Save the theatrics." Pam turned to the clerk. "Submit this as Exhibit 12A. Then, to everyone's surprise, two uniformed federal marshals quietly stepped through the double doors at the back of the courtroom. The tension thickened as the two federal marshals silently made their way down the aisle, their boots echoing softly against the courtroom floor. Their presence didn't go unnoticed. A few attendees in the gallery exchanged glances. Even Judge Stones seemed to pause for a moment, just a flicker, before shifting back into arrogance. He scoffed. "Are we supposed to be impressed by your dramatic timing, Ms. Bondi?" Pam, still calm, replied, "You should be more concerned with what's in Exhibit 12A. The clerk inserted the flash drive into the courtroom's presentation terminal and opened the video file. The screen lit up. A recorded Zoom call. There on the screen was Judge Stones, same voice, same smug tone, speaking on a private call with two senior officials from a corporate legal team currently under federal investigation. The date stamp was just 2 weeks prior. Pam narrated as the video played. "This call was obtained legally by our client under federal whistleblower protections. What you're hearing is a sitting federal judge discussing how to suppress evidence in a case over which he himself would later preside, this one." The gallery fell into stunned silence. Judge Stones went pale. The marshals stopped walking. Now they stood by the rail, just behind the bench, waiting. Pam continued, pulling out a signed and sealed order. "And here's the part that matters most, this signed authorization from the Office of the Inspector General, approved this morning, directing immediate detainment pending review." She handed it to the bailiff. Judge Stones didn't move. Pam tilted her head, eyes locked on him. "You mocked me, Your Honor. You might want to sit down. Or stand up, depending on how you prefer to be cuffed." Judge Stones stared at the document like it was written in another language. His fingers twitched on the edge of the bench, eyes darting from Pam Bondi to the marshals, then back to the screen, still frozen on his own incriminating face. I have judicial immunity," he muttered, voice no longer booming but trembling beneath the weight of the moment. "This is absurd. This is political." The lead marshal stepped forward. "Sir, you are being detained under the authority of a federal order. You will not be placed under arrest in front of the press if you cooperate." Gasps spread through the gallery. Phones were already out. Reporters who had been half asleep now leaned forward like it was a breaking news alert, which, to be fair, it was. Pam stepped aside, giving the marshals a clear path. Still refusing to move, Judge Stones slammed his hand on the bench. "This is a setup. She's grandstanding, this isn't how justice works." Pam turned, her voice sharp and clear. "No, Judge. This is exactly how justice works when someone abuses their bench for personal gain. And no title puts you above the law." The marshals moved in. One gently but firmly took Stones by the arm, while the other opened the gate to the judge's bench. Cameras clicked. The sound of metal handcuffs locking echoed through the courtroom, silencing every whisper. Judge Stones was escorted down the same aisle he used to watch defendants walk, except now, every step was for him. As they disappeared behind the double doors, Pam calmly gathered her documents, nodded at the stunned clerk, and said, "We'll be requesting a special hearing to appoint a new judge. Preferably one who knows what integrity means." The moment Judge Stones disappeared through the courtroom doors in cuffs, the silence shattered. Reporters bolted for the hallway, phones already raised, some live streaming, others shouting updates into microphones. Social media lit up within seconds. Hashtag Judge Stones, hashtag Pam Bondi, and hashtag Courtroom Shock trended nationally before Pam even left the building. But inside Courtroom 6B, the atmosphere remained stunned. The court clerk sat frozen, unsure whether to continue or adjourn. A young associate from Bondi's team leaned in. "Do we stay or?" Pam glanced around the room. "We document everything." She turned back to the bench. "And we submit a motion to preserve all evidence from this courtroom. Every file. Every conversation. Every log." Behind her, the attorneys from the opposing counsel, the very ones implicated in the Zoom call, were whispering frantically, clearly aware their moment was coming next. Outside, flashing cameras and a growing crowd waited. Pam finally stepped through the courthouse doors, flanked by her legal team. Reporters swarmed, microphones flying forward like weapons. "Ms. Bondi, did you plan this? Is this a takedown of the judiciary? Did you know he'd be arrested today?" She stopped on the top step, sunlight catching her hair as she raised one hand. "This isn't about politics. It's about consequences. And for too long, people with robes and titles have forgotten they still answer to the law, just like everyone else." One reporter shouted, "What happens now?" Pam didn't hesitate. "Now," she said, stepping down the stairs. "Now we keep going. Because Judge Stones was just the first." Within an hour, cable news networks were running non-stop coverage. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they all cut into regular programming with banner headlines like, "Federal Judge Arrested Mid-Hearing, Bombshell Evidence Delivered by Pam Bondi, Judicial Earthquake, Pam Bondi Shakes the Bench." Inside the Department of Justice, phones were ringing off the hook. The Inspector General's office issued a rare midday press briefing confirming that serious evidence of misconduct involving Judge Andrew H. Stones had been under review for weeks, and that Bondi's submission had accelerated the timeline. In D.C. backrooms, panic was brewing. Because Judge Stones wasn't just any judge, he'd been connected to a network of back-channel decisions that protected corporate donors, buried ethics violations, and stalled key investigations. His fall meant others were now in danger. Pam knew it. And so did they. At her private office later that evening, Pam sat at a long table surrounded by her small but fierce legal team. Boxes of files were stacked along the walls, years of carefully documented irregularities. She clicked the remote, switching to a secure document on a large screen. At the top, the title read, "Judicial Accountability Initiative, Phase 2, Sealed Coordinators." "This isn't over," she said. Judge Stones was just one piece. The others are still sitting comfortably on the bench, thinking they're untouchable. Her chief investigator leaned forward. "Do we go public with Phase 2? Pam shook her head. "Not yet. We let them sweat. Then we bring the next one down. In their courtroom. On their terms." She paused. "And in handcuffs." By morning, Washington was in full damage control mode. Judicial councils scrambled to issue statements distancing themselves from Judge Stones. Senators who once praised his rulings now offered vague remarks about trusting the process. But the real tremors were felt behind closed doors, in federal courthouses, appellate chambers, and law offices across the Capitol. Pam Bondi's name was now on every judge's lips. Not as a pundit. Not as a politician. But as the woman who had done the unthinkable, and lived to keep going. At a high-rise law office in D.C., two senior federal judges sat at a private table with their legal clerks, watching a looped video of Stones being led out in cuffs. "This is going to get worse," one muttered. The other nodded grimly. "If she has more files like that Zoom call, it's not just Stones." They looked at a sealed manila folder on the table, labeled simply, Phase 2, Internal Referrals. Meanwhile, Pam received a secure message on her encrypted line. The sender, a former federal prosecutor. The subject line, "I'm ready to talk." She opened the message. A single attachment. It was a scanned memo dated 4 years ago, written by Judge Stones himself, explicitly recommending dismissal of an ethics complaint against a now-sitting appellate judge. Pam stood still for a moment. Then she turned to her team. "He's next." Her assistant asked, "Should we prep the federal motion?" Pam nodded. "And schedule the hearing." "I want to do it the same way, in court, in daylight, with cameras rolling." She looked out the window at the Capitol skyline. "They built these walls thinking no one would ever touch them," she said. "Now we pull down the facade, one judge at a time." 2 weeks later, the buzz around the federal courthouse was louder than ever. The media thought it had already seen the peak of courtroom drama when Judge Stones was taken away in cuffs. They were wrong. Pam Bondi had returned, and this time, her sights were higher. The target, Judge Raymond Killian, a senior appellate judge with a pristine public record, and a very dirty private trail. He was presiding over a routine procedural appeal in Courtroom 9C, at least, that's what he thought. As the proceedings began, Killian scanned the courtroom, barely acknowledging Pam. "Let's move quickly," he said. "The court has a tight schedule." Pam stood. "With respect, Your Honor, we have filed a supplemental motion as of this morning. Urgent evidence regarding judicial bias in this court." Killian's face twitched. "Motion denied." "We'll proceed," but then the clerk interrupted. "Your Honor. I've been instructed to inform the bench that a federal oversight team is observing this hearing in real time." That did it. Killian's hands gripped the armrests of his chair as if they could hold back the tide. He tried to speak but Pam was already handing the new exhibit to the court clerk. This time, it wasn't a video, it was a full financial audit. Pam began reading aloud. "Wire transfers totaling $310,000 routed through a third-party firm, later awarded a favorable ruling in Judge Killian's chamber less than 72 hours afterward." Killian's face drained of color. The gallery was packed. Phones were out again. Pam placed a sealed envelope on the evidence table. "And this is a notarized statement from a former clerk, your former clerk, who witnessed Judge Killian altering a court order after hours." The room froze. Then, just like before, 2 federal marshals entered quietly from the back. Pam didn't say a word this time. She didn't need to. The look on Killian's face said everything, he knew what came next. Judge Killian rose slowly from his bench, attempting the dignity of an elder statesman. But his voice betrayed him. "This is an ambush," he stammered. "An orchestrated public shaming. I have decades of service." Pam calmly lifted a document from her case file and held it up. "And decades of unanswered questions. Including this signed memo, your own handwriting, intervening in a fraud investigation that named your brother-in-law as a key witness." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The federal marshals moved closer. Killian raised a trembling hand. "I demand recess. I will not be made a spectacle." But the lead marshal was already in front of the bench. "Sir, you are being placed under federal detainment pending immediate review of misconduct allegations and potential obstruction." Killian stepped back as if the podium itself had betrayed him. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "You're burning down the court." Pam's voice cut clean through the noise. "No, Judge. I'm disinfecting it. The cuffs clicked. Gasps turned into camera flashes as Killian was led away. Some attorneys in the gallery stood in stunned silence, while others exchanged glances, each one suddenly unsure how safe their own secrets were. Back at her table, Pam packed her files with steady hands. No gloating. No smirk. Her associate leaned in, whispering, "That's two." Pam nodded. Two down. She looked toward the gallery, where a familiar figure stood quietly in the back row, a federal ethics auditor from the Department of Justice. Their eyes met. He gave her a barely perceptible nod. Pam turned to her team. The third judge is already nervous. Let's make him paranoid. The fallout from Judge Killian's courtroom arrest sent a shockwave through the judiciary. Within 24 hours, his chambers were sealed for forensic auditing. Anonymous tips flooded the DOJ's whistleblower hotline. 3 high-ranking clerks resigned quietly. And across the federal bench, judges who once felt untouchable were suddenly reviewing their own past decisions with a newfound anxiety. Pam Bondi didn't slow down. Instead of immediately filing against the third judge, she switched tactics, opting for psychological pressure over legal force. Let him sweat, she told her team. No courtroom theatrics this time. Not yet. This one is arrogant, but shaky. The target, Judge Marlon Fisk, a man with a polished public image, Ivy League credentials, and a nasty habit of burying misconduct complaints against corporate allies. He prided himself on always being the smartest man in the room. So Pam started spreading whispers. Strategic leaks to the right reporters. Anonymous op-eds pointing out inconsistencies in his financial disclosure statements. A carefully edited email thread showing he had vacationed at the Aspen home of a corporate board chair, while ruling in that company's favor months later. Pam never publicly confirmed anything. She didn't need to. Within a week, Fisk's inbox was flooded with inquiries. His staff cancelled all public appearances. And the Congressional Oversight Committee quietly sent him a formal request for financial documents. The pressure was working. Pam's team kept compiling more testimonies, sealed transcripts, emails that had been accidentally deleted but recently recovered. Her investigator smiled one evening and said, "He's cracking." Pam looked up from her files. Good. Because we're not just taking this to court. She slid a file across the table labeled, Phase 3, Live Testimony, Scheduled Witnesses, 4, she tapped the folder. We're taking it to the public next. 2 weeks later, the Senate Judiciary Committee chamber was standing room only. Broadcast networks cut in live. C-SPAN was running wall-to-wall coverage. Headlines buzzed, Pam Bondi to present live testimony against sitting federal judge, Judge Marlon Fisk, still clinging to his robe, had refused to step down. But now, under oath, he was about to face a level of public accountability no federal judge had experienced in decades. Pam walked in calmly, her presence measured, confident, but not theatrical. She didn't need theatrics. She had evidence. She raised her right hand and took the oath. Then came the witnesses. A former law clerk testified how Judge Fisk had personally shredded documents linked to a pharmaceutical ruling. A compliance officer revealed a financial trail connecting Fisk to a hidden trust tied to multiple favorable rulings. And then came the smoking gun, an internal memo from a Fortune 100 legal team, outlining how they had pre-written legal language later mirrored word for word in one of Fisk's independent rulings. The room was silent. Fisk, pale and visibly shaken, leaned into his microphone. "This is character assassination. I've served with distinction for over 30 years, Pam leaned in. With distinction, she said. You served with impunity. And now, you serve as an example. Gasps rippled through the crowd. By day's end, the committee voted unanimously to recommend Judge Fisk's suspension and full investigation. Hours later, he quietly submitted a letter of resignation. But Pam wasn't celebrating. In a quiet hallway outside the chamber, She stood with her lead investigator. Cameras swarmed behind glass doors, but she wasn't ready for the press yet. "That's 3, her investigator said softly. Pam nodded. "And that's just federal." She looked down at a thick binder labeled, "State Bench Targets, Phase 4, then she turned, pushed open the doors, and walked into the light of the waiting cameras, not as a former attorney general, not as a pundit, but as the woman who cracked the bench.